A new international study says that 56% of people think the planet's doomed. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. I apologize ahead of time here for being a little late making a new video. I've just had my ass completely kicked by like the worst head cold I've had in a couple years. I think it's the first time I've gotten sick since the pandemic started, and I think just not being sick for that long, it just absolutely whipped my ass. Then my kid got sick, so I take care of her out of work, taking care of her, taking her to the doctor and whatnot. So just little apologies on my part for not getting some new content out for you guys. And on that note, we're going to keep this one a little bit quick too. I'm still feeling a little rugged, so apologize if my voice here is a little bit nasally. So I'm sure I'm not alone in that this last year with the pandemic, with Bernie dropping out in 2020, sort of the political hope coming out of that, with the riots and the severe put down of the protests over BLM summer, with a lot of these climate change catastrophes, extreme weather events going on. I'm sure I'm not alone in having felt a general sense of dread or uneasiness. And for myself in particular, I'm a pretty resilient guy. Came up from nothing, put myself through school, working full time while raising my kid. Getting up and doing and putting one foot in front of the other has never been, has been always kind of second nature for me. But for me personally, even I have felt this, sort of sense of dread, or I guess, if not dread, just sort of listlessness or feeling of being unwell. You might even call it like a mild form of depression, despite, everything in my life going well. Work's going well. I got a great girl in my life. Channel's been doing well. All these things have been going well, but still just underneath all that, there's been this vague feeling of uneasiness. I've talked to other people, just chronic depression or just the same feeling of uneasiness, and kind of going through the news cycle to see what I want to talk to you guys about this week. I came across this article here from Vice. Says 56% of young people think humanity is doomed. And I read that, and I was actually kind of having an off day myself, and I was like, oh yeah, me too. I decided to dive in here. So yeah, just want to dive into this article for you guys and read a little bit of it as usual and talk about it, because I think this 56% of young people think humanity is doomed. It pertains to what they call climate change anxiety. And I think it does go along with what I was just talking about, the sort of feeling of uneasiness or dread or mild depression that many of us have been feeling going through this pandemic, through this rough political summer. So yeah, let's jump into this, guys. It says a major study of 10,000 young people across 10 different countries lays bare the scale of climate crisis-related anxiety felt around the world. Lichen, an 18-year-old living in Hawaii, used to worry about the end of the world. But lately, that doesn't feel all that distant. Now, they're simply worried about what's next. And it's a worry that is affecting nearly half of the world's young people. According to what its authors say, it is the world's largest ever study into young people's fear about the climate crisis. 45% of 16 to 25-year-olds said climate-related anxiety and distress is affecting their daily lives and ability to function normally. So going with that, I can't speak for you guys. I can't speak for everybody, obviously. But reading that does resonate with me. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and say that fear of climate catastrophe, fear of these extreme weather events is like brooding over my shoulder and making me morbidly depressed or anything like that. But, doing this channel, I'm plugged into social media all the time. I'm plugged into the 24/7 news cycle all the time. And I think it would be lying to myself if I didn't say that when I see some of these stories like I touched on in our last video, it being so hot out west that it melted electrical cables on an electric train system, I think it was Portland, right? Or when I see a picture of the fucking ocean on fire from an oil rig explosion or a leak or something like that. Or when I see images of the Amazon rainforest being, hacked and burned and cleared away to make room for, raising cheap beef. When I see New York City, the proverbial center of the world, New York City, flooding, and I hear about people drowning in their apartment's basement, I see the subway filled with water, when I see shit like this, when I see images like this, when I read stories like this, it would be lying to myself, as I said, for me to say that it doesn't have an impact on me. And it's, it's like drops in a bucket, but, enough drops in the bucket being plugged into this stuff all the time, it adds up. And I found with that sort of stuff being in the news cycle, along with everything else that's been going around the last couple of years, it does eat away at me, and I think that I'm not alone in that, and this study suggests that as well. All right, let's go on with this, guys. Says here, almost 60% of the 10,000 young people surveyed across 10 countries attributed this feeling to their national governments, who they said were betraying them, quote unquote, them and future generations through their inaction. 56% of people surveyed said they agreed with the statement that humanity is doomed. That's fucked. 56% of people surveyed out of these 10,000 people internationally said that they agreed with the statement that humanity is doomed. If I already wasn't in a depressed funk today, I fucking am now. Jesus. While 75% said they believed the future was frightening. The study published today in Lancet Planetary Health and led by academics and professionals at the University of Bath, Stanford Medicine Center for Innovation and Global Health, and Oxford Health NHS Foundation Trust and others, found that people from countries more directly and immediately impacted by climate change tended to be more worried about the future. 92% of young people in the Philippines said they felt like the future was frightening, compared to just 56% in Finland. Those are some fucking numbers, and I know this is just one study here, but it seems like it's pretty comprehensive from all over the world, 10 different countries, including in the developed world, and apparently based off the Philippines, the developing world. 56% of people surveyed said they agreed with the statement that humanity is doomed. And 60% of these 10,000 young people surveyed said that they attributed the feelings to their government's inaction. And I think that's something there, because you could imagine if we were facing some of this climate change catastrophe, some of these extreme weather events, how much of those fears and anxieties would be placated if we saw individual national governments also coming together with, a UN coalition to really tackle these things, doing things like China's been doing, where they're planting like 100 million trees a year, if not more. That figure's probably off. I know some countries in Europe are also inlaying new infrastructure. I think Netherlands is actually building like a whole harbor system that kind of helps dictate how high the water levels are in the harbor there. And I guess that would probably go along with something similar to what they're doing in Finland. There's a direct correlation, it seems like, in this survey to countries that are either capable of or are actually doing something to stem the tide of climate change, to a more positive feeling about what the future is going to look like. But even with that, with young people recognizing that there's no real solidarity amongst developing and developed nations to really tackle this issue, there's still, even in countries that are doing better, it's still a generally negative feeling. And I like this statistic here, too. As I was saying, 92% of young people in the Philippines said they felt like the future was frightening. When it comes to climate change, it's going to affect all of us, especially if you consider people migrating from areas that are experiencing the most severe weather events, the most severe warming. Those migrants are going to end up in developed countries and countries in the northern hemisphere. But it's scary enough being in a developed nation that has at least some degree of healthcare, some degree of food security, some degree of expansive infrastructure. And, other than the political gridlock, does have the resources necessary to tackle these issues. So, it's scary enough even coming from a place like the United States or Europe, as I imagine. But I can't imagine being in a place like the Philippines where it's, poverty and sickness, disease, wealth inequality is even, 100 times worse than it is here. And, seeing the news cycle with, fires in your own backyard, potentially, or in a place like the Philippines where there's many low-lying islands. I mean, there's young adults now living in the Philippines that I imagine knew of or had seen some lower-lying islands in the Philippines, and some of those are potentially now underwater, or some of the settlements on various islands could be completely decimated by extensive flooding and rising sea levels and things like that. So I can't even imagine seeing this sort of shit, firsthand, knowing full well that even if your government got its shit together, there's nothing that it's going to be able to do. Going on with this here, guys. But young people in the UK and the US had less faith in their governments than countries like Nigeria and India. Only 28% and 21% of young Brits and Americans thought the government could be trusted when it came to the planet, whereas 51% of Indians had faith in the authorities. The report's author says the climate anxiety is an inescapable stressor, and that unpredictable and extreme weather patterns are likely to further add to psychological distress. For Lichen, watching the wildfires in their father's native Australia was really scary, and that when they were younger left them with a feeling of a kind of raw fear. I just zone out and watch something about it, they told Vice World News via Instagram. Now they want to pursue environmental journalism, action that they said makes them feel better. But for Malika, a 15-year-old from Lebanon, climate anxiety has exacerbated her mental health problems. She remembers contracting a virus as a child from swimming in one of Lebanon's polluted rivers. It's one of many memories she recalls as she thinks about the anxiety disorder diagnosis that she received last year, and how much worrying about the planet is part of it. She feels like the school projects on climate change that she is doing aren't enough. I felt like I'm doing something just very small. I don't have that influence in the world, she told Vice World News via Instagram. So I was always and am still anxious about what's going to happen in this world. Are we going to die of climate change? After we die, will people suffer? The co-lead author on the study, Carolyn Hickman from the University of Bath, said, "Our children's anxiety is a completely rational reaction given the inadequate responses to climate change they are seeing from their governments. What more do governments need to hear to take action?" Well, if you weren't depressed already, you are now. And that last little quote there from the 15-year-old Malika, young girl, young woman, what have you. That just has me thinking about my kid. And I'm sure those of you who watch the show that have kids as well, kind of have the same thing pop up into your head. My daughter's 8 now, and I don't expose her to too much. I have conversations with her about it if she asks me questions. But, when I'm talking with other adults, other grown-ups, as it were, about this sort of stuff, you can, she's sitting on the couch and she's listening. And I can't, it's hard for me to imagine having these sort of conversations with her as she gets older and starts, seeing the news herself, or being on social media and seeing these sort of things, and being a young girl and seeing wildfires burning everywhere out west, seeing New York City, going underwater, and inevitably, like I said earlier, seeing caravans of migrants trying to escape some of these weather events and global warming generally. And, what do we say to our kids? Oh, my bad. We tried, but the government wouldn't do anything about it. Yeah, the world's burning and all these catastrophic things are happening, and you're going to have no real world and no real shot at life. But that's just how it is, and I'm sorry. How are we supposed to explain this to our kids? It's not conversation I'm looking forward to having, And, this article is reflective of another thing. climate doomerism, so to speak. I think this kind of reflects the feeling, that people are having seeing their governments do nothing, little to nothing, and giving up and kind of just making the assumption, like this, young girl said, that she feels like she can't do anything about it. And, I get it. What is she supposed to do? She's a 15-year-old girl and don't have any power in the world. And yet all the people that have all the power aren't doing anything about it. Like they're suicidal on a suicidal fucking drug binge in our capitalist system, just so caught up with money and greed and power that they can't even, either they don't fathom or see or understand that they're leading humanity off the edge of this precipice that we can never come back from, or they just don't care. But the last thing I want to touch on with this video is that climate doomerism and how it maybe relates to talking to our kids. This is terrifying. And as we said in the beginning of the video, I think all of us have moments of fear or anxiety or depression about this. But just like with everything else when it comes to political struggle of the working class and stuff like that, class warfare, we can't give up. And we can't instill in our children's heads the notion of giving up, the notion of fear, and that there's nothing that we can do about it. Because at the end of the day, if we do give up and we stop fighting, we stop protesting, if we stop advocating for electoral change, even militant revolution, for those of us that are taking that route, then we have lost. And we have everything to lose and everything to gain for our children and for their children's children. So what I'm trying to say is, when it comes to this, I know we read a report like that and it's depressing and it makes you want to give up, but at the end of the day, that's not an option. So no matter what, no matter, how anxious this sort of thing makes us feel, we got to keep moving forward. But yeah, guys, that's all I have for you. I just wanted to make a quick video for you guys. Again, I'm sorry for not getting some content out sooner. I'm sorry if this wasn't the best one. I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather. But, I was just scrolling through and I saw that article and I thought maybe you guys would find it interesting. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think about this. Do you agree with this study? Are you in that 54% of people around the world that thinks we're completely fucked? Like David Attenborough here says, planet's fucked, fam. If so, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Get a conversation going. What sort of action do we need to see on a national and a global front to seriously tackle this to the degree that we can slow this climate change cycle down, stop it altogether, or even do something to reverse it? But yeah, guys, drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Until next time, as always, it's great hanging out with you, and I'll speak with you again soon. Bye.
Yes, I know.